Hello everyone. As part of the plan that I had for improving my chess rating from 1600 to 2000, as you might have seen my previous video, which I've laid out the plan in detail for the first month on what I'll be doing to improve my chess. This is one of the books that I had studied many years ago, and I thought I'll go back to it and have another look at it to see if that was gonna help me with improving my chess. The book is called A Road to Chess Mastery by Max Euwe and Walter Meiden. Max Euwe was the 5th world champion. In this book, he shows examples of 25 games between chess master and an amateur. And he goes through the details of the opening, middle game and end game, and explains how the master's thinking process is different to the amateur, and what causes the amateur to lose the game, and what strengths the master has over amateur. So I thought you might find this useful as well. So I'm going through the first game, and I try to go through one of the games each week. So hopefully this can improve some of my understanding of chess. So let's go through this and see how it develops. So in this case, white is the master and black is the amateur. So the first move is d4. As you might know, the first thing is we know is the 4 central squares of the board are very important, and whoever controls the center most of the time controls the game. So generally we try to move the pawns to control the center at the beginning, whether it's going to be pawns or knight moves. It's all about fighting for the center. I know there are openings like the b4 or the b3 and g3, etc. But those are not very common. So we'll stick to these ideas of controlling the center for the time being, and we're not going to use any of those less popular openings. Black moves knight to f6. Again, controlling the center squares. c4 by white, adding more pressure on d5. So now you can see that white is controlling quite a lot of the squares towards the center. e6 by black, neutralizing white's pressure on d5, and also opens the diagonal for the bishop to move, which provides the flexibility for moving that and castling on the king side. Knight to c3, again developing the knight, putting pressure on the central squares. Knight to the b4, bishop to b4. This is pinning the knight, meaning that it neutralizes some of the pressure that white was exerting on the central squares. So it also develops the bishop and opens the squares, the king for castling. So this structure, this opening is called the Nimzo Indian, and black normally exchanges the bishop for the knight, resulting in white having double pawns, and that is a good compensation for the 2 bishops that white has. In this case, white plays queen to c2. So this is intending to control the e4 square, allowing for the e4. And also it would prevent doubling of the pawn in case the bishop takes the knight. So in here, black has got few options, one of them being castling, the other one being b3, but both of those options are possible. It gives gives black some chances. Yeah, so let's just have a quick look at some of these options. If we go castle here, the game could continue with the e4 as we were intending before, e5, knight to e4, and gives black some good chances. b6 on the other hand, we can still continue with e4. In this case, the d5 is a mistake because that would result in losing of a piece. So you can see the bishop is unprotected. Knight to c6 would result in the queen taking the free piece. Okay, let's go back. So white plays here a3, forcing black to make a decision whether it wants to keep the bishop or exchange it now. White could have also played pawn takes pawn here. That's the exchange variation. In this case, black continues by taking the knight. The other option was also to take the bishop back to e7. That's the orthodox variation. So as we said, we're going to take this with the queen. In this case, b takes the bishop would also be possible. So this was also possible, and it will not result in a double pawn because you can exchange here and get rid of the double pawns, or even with the c5 potentially. The game could go on like this and getting rid of the double pawns, and black has got good counter chances. Anyway, going back, we take it with the queen. So this is a good move, wins a tempo, so it forces white to move, and queen moves to c2. This keeps the pressure on the center and does not prevent the development of the bishop. Black here plays castles. So this move is given a question mark because it is a bit slow in this case. Black's compensation for losing the two bishops was its advancement in development. Now, it was best for black to continue with the development. In this case, knight to c6 would have kept the initiative and take advantage of the better development. So it would keep pushing. For example, this game could have continued something like this, which is almost equal, or it could have continued with e3, e5, takes. You can see this becomes very sharp. And very tactical. So at this point, the engine considers this to be equal. It can be seen how black kept the initiative and uses the advancement in the development to his advantage, causing white some problems and asking some questions. Let's go back. So this is the choice that black made. As we said, this is a passive move. White plays e3. Again, this is a bit of a passive move from black. I mean, you could have played c5 or b6, which was probably better options in this case. Let's have a look at b6, for example. The game could have continued like this. You can see again the game becomes very sharp and very tactical, but black has got good advantage here. So putting pressure on the knight, so you can see that the knight is now attacked twice, just defended once. F5 supporting the knight, so now we can't take the pawn, the extra pawn. In this case F3 is played. Black plays knight to f6. I think there's a lot of possibilities for this move here. It's quite interesting. The engine actually gives advantage for black in this case. But you can see the amateur has moved back with his knight and kept the game going that way. So we take the d5, knight takes. So white has got the majority in the center now and the two bishops. So the two bishops now require mobility. Pushing pawns at the right moment can provide the mobility and the open diagonals for the bishops. But this is preparing for e4. The immediate e4 results in giving up the two bishops. If we you can see you can takes knight to f4. So we need to take that. The engine still evaluates this slightly better for white. So this prepares the e5 prepares for the e5 move. Black is also looking for a counterplay by playing e5. But first protects the knight, because an immediate e5 results in e5. So if we have a quick look at that, if we just move here, you can see that the knight is not protected now, so just white takes the initiative. The other option was taking that pawn here. I'm just playing these quickly. I don't want to go into the details of these, of how the engine evaluates these. But you could see that how the game could have been played. And this is what has got advantage here. So let's move on. Again, e4 was possible here, but white would have difficulty castling, so it just wants to castle, take the king to safety, and then it can open up the center and open up the diagonals for the bishop. g6 is trying to reduce white's threat on that diagonal. You can see. So now is the time for e4. Exchanging pawns would have mobilized white's bishops. White starts bringing pieces into action. Threatening the bishop, so the bishop moves away. Notice the pin on e6. White threatens to win a pawn by pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. So takes, and the queen takes the pawn. So that's why the king needs to move. Removing the pin. Okay, so here bishop to f4, developing the bishop and controlling more squares, but there's no direct threat this by this move. It is preparing, moving the bishop to a better square where it controls now a lot of squares from here. You can see. So black moves to h6, reducing the white's dark square bishop activity. So while it's controlling, just removing some of these squares from bishop's axis. So also if the e5 at some point happens, or from either side, then this bishop has become very inactive. So that's one of the reasons. Centralizing the rook, that's one of the ideas. Normally you try to centralize your rooks if you're pushing the pawns in the center, preparing for more control, relieving the knight from protecting the d4 pawn, and also eyeing be5, pinning that knight. And also, if you always consider this lining up the rook against the queen is a good idea, because once things happen in the center, this can open up and create some threats against the queen. So black realizes this and moves the queen away. It's a good choice. Now knight moves to g3, mobilizing the knight, adding to the threats on the king side. For example, if g5 happens here, then this knight can be very useful by providing support to and attacking to these to the king. Well, black can't do much. He's paralyzed and has no good moves. I mean, g5 was possible here. Let's see what happens. As I said, that's gonna pin the knight and then threatens knight to h5. Let's say the king moves, you can takes, and you win back your piece, and white has won a pawn and opens the center. Now there's a lot of threats against the king as well. So you can see that black hasn't got many choices here. Threatening to take the pawn, so attacking it twice, and that pawn will eventually be pinned. Again, the queen moves out of the line of the rook. So now the game is entering a new phase. White has built up and accumulated power in the last 5 moves. Now he starts to make use of this power and starts to attack the king. So how is he going to go about that? Start with this. White gives up the center only because black moves are forced now. We'll see how these are forced. For example, this is how black moves. He could have, if he had taken it with G pawn, then this wins a pawn. If he had moved the knight here, we could have taken the pawn on e6, taking here, and e7 winning material. So you can see again, black hasn't got many choices, so he has to take with the e pawn. Now we move the queen and threaten the h6 pawn and threatening to take the queen. So to prevent that, black plays g5. I mean, he could have played queen to h6. What would happen then? We would still go and take that. And you can see you've got the threat of the rook. Now we've got the open files for the rook, and this wins the queen. The other alternative, not alternative, but move was here, but this could follow by taking that and taking the pawn on h6. Okay, so let's go back to this and see what happened here. So I'm just going through this very slowly because I need to learn these. I've gone through the game, but I just want to have a look at these myself again and make sure that I remember things and why things are done. So it'll be just absorbing and digesting a lot of these information while I'm looking at this board myself at the same time. Now, such sacrifices are possible if there are sufficient attacking pieces at your disposal. Here you can see that the white queen, knight, bishop, and the rook. See, these ones are immediately available to take part in the attack, and potentially this rook and the queen can also come close to the king and participate in the attack. So in these scenarios you can sacrifice. You might not immediately see the full lines actually to the checkmate, but you can see the threats that can be created. So I mean, we haven't lost many, so we have gained 2 pawns for the bishop. Now that we have stripped the king of this shelter and protection, you can see the king will be exposed. We've got the bishop here, the knight, which is controlling squares. Rook can potentially penetrate to the back rank, to the 7th rank, and all these are threats. This king moves to h8. I mean, what are the other possibilities? The other possibility is to move to h7. In this case, you move here. Takes. And you can see the threats are coming, and white will win soon. If instead of moving the king is gone here, this becomes a lot worse and results in a checkmate very quickly. So now if move to h7, if black doesn't take this and moves the other knight, this comes and threatens the knight. Now he has to take. This also results in a loss very quickly. So what are the other options? The other option is to move the knight away here. In this case, and you can see now loses the queen, which also results in a mate very quickly. So you can see how the threat of these rooks, the rook on the 6th rank, is causing a lot of trouble for black. The one other option is this one. What will happen here? And you can see a lot of these lines, they end up in losing for black, but these are easily they can easily be calculated, so you have to go through obviously these ones. So the other option is to move, sorry, this is from here. That's a move, and black can move the other knight. This case, we take it, and you can see that black hasn't got many options now and wins. So you can see a lot of these lines, they end up in winning because of the sheer amount of material that we have and the threats that we have got against the exposed king. Anyway, let's go back to our game. Check. The other option here was to bring the knight, but this doesn't help very much. And you can see now we can take the queen and the game is winning. The one other option here was to take this one. You can see the threat of checkmate very soon. So check. check. And mate. So I didn't go into the details of every single move, but you can get the general idea of how white forces or mobilizes moves his pieces against the black king and strips it off the shelters or the protections and attacks against it. And you can see that black was playing a bit passively and allowing white to activate his pieces. So that's the first game. Hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a bit slow and I was going through things again myself, but hopefully you'd find that useful. If you think it's a bit too slow, you can actually watch this in higher speed to take you less time. Anyway, I'll leave that to you, and I will see you next time. I will leave a link to the Lee chess study for this game. If you want to look at it yourself and go at your own pace, you can have access to it via the Lee chess study.